to our summer forms series. July is all about buyer forms. Today we're going to start with our backup offer addendum. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. Throw it in the chat box. You know, raise your little zoomy hand, whatever works. If you're watching this on replay, you can throw them in the chat box or in the comment section. Our backup offer addendum, I'm getting more and more questions about this form, which is funny, but that's all right. You can do it one of two ways. Okay, your backup offer addendum can either be used at time of offer. So if you know it's multiple offers, or maybe the property already has an accepted offer in place, you can submit your offer with the backup offer addendum. The benefits of the backup offer addendum, well, let's talk about the second way. The second way you can do it is part of a counter offer. So maybe the seller decides they're going to go forward with another offer, so they counter you, or you could counter a buyer with being in backup position. What's the benefit for the buyer? The benefit for the buyer of this backup offer addendum is it locks the seller in that if something happens with their current contract, they are forced to move forward with your current offer before putting the property back on the market. So it locks you in that backup position. And notice too, they can have multiple backup offers, but each one's going to have a position. So if I've got a listing and I've got 4 offers on the property, I might accept one, and then I might put an offer or 2 of them into backup offer position. My primary one would be number 1. The next one would be number 2. Original buyer falls out of contract. Now, seller, we're going to reach out to buyer and backup offer position number 1 to confirm that they're ready to move forward. Buyer and backup offer position number 1 says, no, I don't want to move forward. Now we go to backup offer number 2. So as a buyer, it's nice because you're kind of locked in. If that was the property, your buyer's like, oh my gosh, I love this property. I know it's already in contract. Can we submit an offer anyways? And you'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Let's submit it with the backup offer addendum number 1, which forces that seller to go with you if something goes awry with that offer. The benefit to a seller for the backup offer addendum, why would you want to do this? If the market's really hopping, you're getting multiple offers in, there's lots of activity, you may not want to go with a backup offer addendum. It may not be in your seller's best interest because you might be able to solicit a better offer if we put the property back on the market. So why would a seller want this? Well, number 1, if it's a slow market, now it's given that other buyer hope. So hopefully they're not out looking for other properties still. So your success rate at getting that transaction closed, even if the first buyer falls out, becomes a little higher that way. The other thing is oftentimes this comes into play, like if I've got a seller that's doing a purchase forward where it's contingent on the sale of the it's contingent on the sale of the buyer's property, right? COP. Sorry, there's a weird noise. Then this solidifies that not only do we have an offer in hand that we've already accepted, but we also have a backup offer in place. So on my addendum for my COP form, I would state that not only is the property already on the market, we already have an accepted offer, and we have a backup offer in place, or 2 backup offers, right? So it just solidifies that seller's position as being able to complete the transaction moving forward. So it's strategic, right? Sometimes we may want to do this. Sometimes we may not want to do the backup offer addendum. So it starts at the top. Any questions about why we would use this form or how at that point? We'll talk about how to fill it out here in a second.
I do.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask is, as a buyer's agent, like if you're submitting one of these with your offer, do you think the seller, like let's say you knew that there's going to be multiple offers, like 4 or 5, and you submit one of these offers or the backup offer, do you think that maybe they'd be like, it was between like maybe 2 good ones that they might want to do like a multiple counter offer? And then with yours, like they may not, because they're like, oh, they're okay. Like we'll just put them on backup. Like they're okay with being backup versus like being in the lead.
Yeah. So if
You
it
know?
was a multiple offer situation, I probably would not submit this with my offer as a buyer's agent. I would submit it. I would just submit my offer in a multiple offer because you might be looked at. Although the other way the seller might see it is these buyers are so serious that even if I don't choose them first, they want to be in backup offer position. Like these buyers are ones that want to close on this property. It may cause them to choose you, right? So it's kind of like in how you explain it, and hey, and maybe even that you stipulate as part of the offer that if buyer's offer is not accepted, buyer would like to, buyer has submitted backup offer addendum to be in backup offer position number one. But again, multiple offers, I probably wouldn't submit it in that case. I would only, as a buyer's agent for the most case, I would submit it in the case that my buyer wants to write an offer on a property that's already in contract. Submit that backup offer addendum. Or in the case that we had multiple offers, seller didn't accept a buyer's offer, I would come back to seller and be like, hey, do you mind if I submit to you a backup offer addendum for our offer? Right? So that they put you in that place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions before we walk through this form? Alrighty. So you're going to fill it out just like we do the top of all the forms. It's an addendum to the purchase agreement, or it would be an addendum to a counter offer or another form, right? So whatever that might be, we're going to always put that date in here on the next line. And remember that date's going to be the date that's printed on the top, usually the left-hand corner of the first page of whatever form it is that you're referencing. You're going to fill in the full property address, the buyer's names and the seller's names. The buyer and seller are now referred to as parties. The agreement is in backup position number, right? So this is where we talked about, like you might be number one, you might be number three, whatever that is, we're going to fill it in there, okay? And is contingent upon, okay? So it's in backup position number one. It's contingent upon a written cancellation of any prior contracts and related escrow. So prior transaction between seller and other buyers and mutual release of the obligation to buy, sell, or exchange that property. Seller and other buyers may mutually agree to modify or amend the terms of prior transaction, right? So it's not telling the seller that, hey, we can't agree to changes to the offer that you've already accepted, even though we're in backup position number one. Seller they can do amendments to that offer. It's totally fine. And this is contingent upon it actually canceling, not just the transaction with the cancellation form, but escrow agreeing that the transaction is canceled. So if the buyers want to tie up that transaction with legal action, then you wouldn't be moving forward, just so you know. Cancellation rights for buyer. Buyer may cancel the agreement in writing anytime before the seller provides copies of written cancellations and releases of prior transactions signed by all parties to that contract, right? So the buyer, there's no, like, we don't lock our buyer in and they can't get out of this in case they find a better home. This just locks the seller in, really, from the buyer standpoint. For the buyer or seller, if seller is unable to provide such written signed cancellation cancellations and release to buyer by blank date, then either party may cancel the agreement in writing. I recommend that you fill in a date here. It may be that you talk with the listing agent and find out how long the contingency periods are. If we just accepted the offer today, which is the 17th, and they have a 10-day inspection contingency, then we may, hey, we'll give you our inspection, loan, and appraisal. I'd probably give it to all three. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That gives us to the 10th, really, till they have to perform until the 28th on Monday. So I might say, hey, let's go with the 30th of July. I'm going to give you a couple days past that in case it runs over to give me that cancellation. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't move forward still. That just gives the seller an out too, right? So our buyer always has an out. This gives our seller an out. So we may even want to be like, hey, we might want to go further, right? We might want to say, hey, today's the 17th of July. They just accepted that offer. We're going to put a date in there of 8/17, their anticipated close of escrow date, right? So whatever that is, you can fill it in there. Again, remember this date here is going to be the ultimately giving the seller the right to cancel on this backup offer in case they get a better offer in hand. If I was submitting this on behalf of my seller as part of a counter offer, right? So how I work as a buyer's agent is different than how I work as a seller's agent. So as a buyer, I want to stretch this date out as long as possible because I know my buyer can cancel at any given time, but the seller can't. So this gives me the seller the opportunity to cancel. If I'm working for a seller, I might be like, hey, we're supposed to all have contingencies removed within 10 days. So we are the 28th. I'll give you 10 days, and if we don't have it then either party may cancel. Now this gives the seller the right to cancel on this backup offer addendum in case a better offer comes into play. All right, so that's two. Three is buyer's deposit shall be delivered to escrow holder within 3 business days after copies of the written cancellations and releases signed by all parties of prior transaction are provided to the buyer, or if checked, shall immediately be handed as provided in the agreement, right? So unlike oftentimes like our contingency for sale of buyer's property, I still have the deposit go in right away, or even the seller's purchase of replacement property, like deposit goes in right away. This one I would delay. I would leave it with the default of, hey, the deposit goes into escrow once cancellation is provided to us. You could always firm it up. You could say, hey, within 1 business day, we'll have that deposit into escrow. But otherwise, I'd leave it the 3. I generally don't put the buyers on a backup offer because the chance of success on closing a backup offer are, we're going to say like 30%. Okay. So I usually don't have my deposit tied up in escrow already. So I would not check the box. I would just leave it here. Section 4 is time periods. Time periods in the agreement. This is for investigations, contingencies, covenants, and other obligations shall begin on the day after seller provides copies of signed cancellations and releases of prior transaction. Now remember here, the time periods begin on the day after, right? So that would be day 1. The day they provide it be day 0. Okay. Or if checked, so if we check this box here, boop, all time periods shall begin as provided in the agreement. However, if the date of the close of escrow is a specific calendar date, that date shall not be extended unless agreed to in writing by buyer and seller. So for the most part, again, I'm going to leave this the default where it all begins after they provide copies of releases and cancellations, because I don't want my buyer spending money on investigations, appraisals, those type of things if it's not a done deal that we're going to close on this property. Okay. But if we wanted to speed up that process, we would say, hey, all time periods begin as provided. Scope of broker duty. The parties agree that no real estate broker or agent involved in this transaction has advised either party whether the transaction was legally canceled or if the party is legally entitled to the deposit. Expiration. If this backup offer is attached to a purchase agreement or counter offer, it expires with that other document. Otherwise, this backup offer shall be deemed revoked unless signed and delivered back to the party initiating it by 5 p.m. on the 3rd day after it is signed by the seller. Okay, seller and buyer sign. Okay. Now, notice here, so that's our backup offer addendum. At the bottom of the backup offer addendum, we're just going to sign up to line 6 or section 6 here. This bottom section is if the seller does cancel the prior transaction. Okay, seller, we're going to provide this bottom section signed by the sellers with copies of those cancellation forms to our buyer saying, hey, buyer in backup position number 1, we are game on. It's your turn to go. We provide this bottom section. Seller acknowledges being advised to seek the advice of a California real estate attorney regarding the cancellation of all prior transactions. Seller hereby delivers notice to buyer that all prior transactions have been canceled and released. Attached hereto are copies of the signed cancellation and release of prior transaction. This agreement is now in full effect. Okay, so once my seller fills this out, signs this, sends it over to my buyer, we are now under the obligations of the purchase agreement, and my buyer's ability to cancel is now has to be within the realm of that purchase agreement and not just at the whim as it was prior to the seller giving us this form. And then there's acknowledgement now. We acknowledge receipt of the signed notice of cancellation and release of prior transaction form. The initials below are not required, but can be used as evidence that the initialing party has received the completed form. And remember, delivery these days is when I email the form to you, to your designated electronic delivery address that was on the purchase agreement. Once I have proof that I emailed that form to you, whether or not you chose to open it, whether or not you chose to check your email, it doesn't matter. That is now the time period has started. Okay, that's considered delivered. Um, any questions on that backup offer addendum? BUO, pages 1 of 1. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. I hope this was helpful. Next week, we'll be back the same time. We'll be covering our cancellation of contract, our contingency removal for our buyers, our contingency for the sale of the buyer's property, and our notice to the seller to perform. As well as if you have any questions about other forms or buyer-related forms, you can always bring those questions to class as well, and I will answer those for you. And then at the end of the month, we are having our wonderful attorney back, Bob, talking about how to stay out of court. Again, those are always good classes. He always touches on something new and exciting that we may not have thought about and to be able to protect ourselves. So he'll be back at the end of the month. Any questions before we wrap up today? All right, everyone. Thanks for joining me and have a great day. We will see you next Thursday.
Thank you.